I'm sitting down with Captain Leigh Maddox, formerly of the Maryland State Police, and now on the board of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And she's joined us here today as a member of LEAP to really continue the conversation from the Harm Reduction Conference. Now, Captain Maddox, we appreciate you coming down. Can you tell me a little bit about your work on issues of addiction treatment and drug policy and how you first got started dealing with these issues?
Certainly. So while I was with the Maryland State Police, a very good friend of mine who was an undercover narcotics officer and trooper was brutally murdered in D.C. During a hand-to-hand drug buy. And he was the head of our union and just an extremely close personal friend as well. I had spoken to him that morning, and he was very excited about the work he was doing, and then by midnight he was dead. And when that happened, I thought to myself, what are we doing? Why are we putting good people in harm's way over something that clearly is not making any difference, because drug addiction rates are not falling, and all we're really doing is putting more and more people in jail. But then it took me another decade of really thinking through these ideas before I came to the conclusion. And by then I was a practicing attorney, and I was teaching at the University of Maryland School of Law and working in the community in the clinical environment, and I was actually seeing firsthand what our drug policies were doing to people and how they were setting them up for failure, one sentence at a time. And it spoke to me in a way that it transformed me. It was an epiphany, if you will. And once that happened, I was able to find Law Enforcement Against Prohibition through Major Neil Franklin. And he and I, worked together previously. He told me it was a great organization. So I joined, I began speaking out, ultimately joined the board. And here we are, trying to make it work in Maryland,
And you mentioned having joined the board through Major Franklin. Can you tell me a little bit more about your work with LEAP and what you've done since joining and getting on to the board?
Sure. So I've spoke internationally. We've done trial support with some other police officers who have been discriminated against, if you will, because of their views in speaking out on reform. I serve as a compliance officer on the board, so if things go awry, if we have speakers or board members that aren't messaging properly, I help the board kind of deal with that. And then, of course, we're always trying to raise money because we are a nonprofit and it's a challenge.
In thinking about being on the board and having to address those challenges as a nonprofit on what can be a really controversial topic, have you felt like you've found the support in the law enforcement community on the issue of ending prohibition and really refocusing towards a harm reduction perspective?
Certainly. So it's been slow. It's been difficult to get the officers when they're in a group, because you get this group thing going on, and honestly, we're asking people to look at the work that they're currently engaged in, say this is wrong, this is harming the people that I'm sworn to protect, and asking them to do a 180. That's a really hard ask. So we started with retired law enforcement, retired judges, retired prosecutors. More and more of those are coming on board. And now, one-on-one, the police officers, they're friends with me on Facebook. We talk on a regular basis, okay? And some things they're more comfortable speaking publicly about, some things they can't. We have a barrack commander at Bel Air Barrack in Harford County who's running for the 1st Congressional District. And one of his platforms is ending prohibition of marijuana. And he's an active duty lieutenant police commander with the state police. So I do see progress. It's been slow, and the incrementalism can be very frustrating, but we're holding that line, and we know that eventually wisdom is going to prevail.
So in thinking about what that wisdom might be and how it can be translated into policy, what needs to be done to address the problems of drug addiction and drug-related violence in Maryland today, from your perspective?
Well, for me, the answer is regulate and control all drugs. Take the market away from the cartels and the illicit gangs, and move it into the hands of medical professionals that are trained and understand how to cope with substance abuse disorder and understand how to deal one-on-one with people who have problems that they feel the need to medicate for because they just have no hope in their communities. And then also the second piece, which is so very vitally important, because after you end any war, you have to give back and restore that community. We've seen that internationally. It's time to do that at home.
You know, it's interesting that you put it in those terms, you know, really connecting the wars that the United States had abroad back with the war on drugs and, you know, rebuilding communities. Really, what do you think needs to be done to make meaningful progress in that sense here at home in Maryland, you know, thinking of Baltimore, thinking about Bel Air, thinking about, you know, Anne Arundel County, wherever the problems of addiction have arisen, what needs to be done to make meaningful change?
Well, an important piece is taking the police and letting them off the hook. Right? This does not need to be a criminal issue at all. The police can still refer people who are causing disorder in their communities, but they should not be arresting people for what they, adult consensual behavior, decide to put into their bodies. So that could be, and that could be done without any legislation at all. All the major chiefs need to do is get together and say, you know what? We're no longer arresting. We are going to use our discretion that is inherent in our profession, that is very important to our profession, and we're going to make a conscious decision to stop stigmatizing and criminally arresting people for what they decide to put in their bodies, absent some other sort of harm. Don't get me wrong. You're stealing my car, you're breaking into my house, you're robbing a bank. It's a different story. But if all you're doing is hurting yourself, let's get you to the docks when you're ready. When you're ready. And in the meantime, let's embrace other harm reduction techniques. Let's give out free needles. Let's find safe injection facilities. Let's, end the stigma of marijuana completely. Medical marijuana, I think, is a wonderful first step, but ultimately the models from Colorado and Washington and Alaska and other places are going to be what drives dries up the cartel and their ability to make profit off of this.
So, we really appreciate you being here today at the Harm Reduction Conference. What do you think the place of law enforcement against prohibition is in changing the discussion around drug policy nationally?
I view our most important role as being a bridge. I speak cop. I can also speak community. Okay? And so being that bridge and helping people walk from one side to the other so they can start building trust and start learning to respect one another, not just because they're different, but because they have so much more in common. And so if LEAP can help people see where your common places are and the places where you can start the conversation to build a stronger community, then that's, I think, where our most effectiveness is going to be moving forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Captain Maddox.
Thank you.